Welcome, I'm Bill Wake. We're here working on a calculator that supports kilt making, and we've come a long ways. We've got the calculator part basically done, and we're in the middle of figuring out how do you do a box pleat, which is kind of a standard pleat that they do. Pleat is folded fabric like you see on the hem of a skirt or dress. All right. Now, I guess I should keep that up. I try not to do any coding on things between sessions, but I certainly do thinking. And one is I needed to rethink how we're doing these variables. And we had said, basically I had said pleatWidth and gap were variables that you could control. And it turns out that gap is not really one you control. You let that fall out of the other calculations. So I marked all the computations here. So the F means it's fixed from outside. So it's not, if you change a value, those F ones are not going to change. So if I change pleatWidth, all four of those on top stay the same for pleatCount. Okay, V means I can change it. So pleatWidth is a variable, pleatCount is a variable. Changing one affects the other. Okay, so we got to be a little careful there. And then C is ones that are consequences. Oh, actually, this one's a C. Let's get that straight. Pleat yardage is sett times settsPerPleat, so it's a consequence. Oops, whatever. All right, and so we've got some adjusting to do on that. We need to make sure that changing pleatCount affects width, but doesn't re-affect pleatCount, okay? And vice versa for pleatWidth. All right, so I laid out some equations. So things that can change, the settsPerPleat, the hip to rear, those are our fixed values. So we'll start with those. Okay, so if you change the set, I'm saying you should recalculate the pleat. Take the pleat, I guess pleat yardage I should probably put in there, but it's the hip size divided by the number of pleats. All right, and you're not changing hip, you're not changing number of pleats, so that doesn't really change. Okay, the pleat itself we divide by 3 to make a standard box pleat where it, I don't have a picture handy, but it looks kind of like that. Number of pleats then is hip size divided by pleatWidth, which changed, so we have to adjust that. Total yardage is affected by changes in number of pleats, so we affect that. Okay, second one across, change in hip. Well, pleat yardage is still hip divided by number of pleats. The pleat is the pleat yardage divided by 3, just like the first case. The gap is 0, which is also the same as that 3 times pleat number. The total yardage is pleat yardage times the number of pleats again, okay? And everything else is unchanged, whatever little else there is. All right. Now, if we change pleat or number of pleats, so change in pleat, we recalculate that gap. We recalculate the pleat number of pleats because it's now pleat has changed, so the number of pleats changes. It may not come down to an even number, in which case we've got to do something. I mean, that's kind of an unacceptable result. Total yardage is same as it always is, pleat yardage times the number of pleats, and then others are unchanged. Okay, and then finally changes in number of pleats. The pleat yardage updates to its standard. The pleat updates to yardage divided by 3, so it's sort of the new calculation case. Only the bottom left one sets the pleat to anything particular. The gap is a function of that. Total yardage is a function of pleat yardage and pleats, and the others are unchanged. Okay, so I think those are the right things. What I notice is most of these, okay, pleat equals pleat yardage divided by 3 occurs in 3 out of 4. Pleat yardage equals hip divided by number of pleats. Well, it gets updated in 2 of them, but it's probably, it's true still in the other 2. Pleat yardage. Yeah. Now, well, yeah, I guess as a consequence, we'll have to watch this change in pleat one. That sounds a little risky. All right. Total yardage is sort of a pure formula applied to all of them. And then the gap is recomputed in Well, 3 out of 4, and the fourth one really could do that the same way. It's a consequence of that gap stuff. Okay. All right. That all seems, I don't know. I want to say I think I've caught it all. But I've certainly caught it better than we have it now. All right. Then the last thing is constraints, and I marked them TBD because I don't know what to say on these. Let's just put something in here and get the ball rolling. Okay. So of those variables, we got the set. Okay, the settsPerPleat, the pleat. Well, I guess implicit in there is the pleat yardage that's calculated. The pleat, the gap, or let's see, also the number of pleats. I guess hip is up here as a constant, relatively speaking. Number of pleats and total yardage for pleats. Maybe I should call this pleats yardage. Pleats total yardage. Okay. So those things. Well, the set is defined by whatever it is in reality at some measure. settsPerPleat is a decision. It's just numeric. Well, there's probably some crazy values. I mean, the examples my wife gave me, nothing was more than 2 settsPerPleat. But I suppose if you had a very narrow set, you might have to do more. Hip, well, it's certainly greater than 0. Look better there. Greater than 0. The pleat yardage, well, I mean, I suppose this is greater than 0 as well. This is greater than 0. Greater than 0, it's a consequence, so it's not really too important. The pleat, well, it's got to be greater than 0, and it's got to be less than the pleat yardage. Let's move this one down. Okay, remember pleat yardage is set times settsPerPleat, so it's greater than that. Sorry, those are both greater than 0. So this is greater than 0, and the pleat, if you got so much, if you got 6 inches for your pleat, you can't be 6 inches. You really aren't going to be 5 1/4 or anything like that either. But it's at least something. Your gap, well, one thing is it can be less than 0. I found that out, in which case it's called an overlap. So the biggest gap could be this pleat size, I guess. So it's less than pleat. Okay. Number of pleats is greater than 0. And total yardage is greater than 0. I don't know if there's other constraints we can find. Now there's, let's see, where's pleat, number of pleats, and it's got to be an integer. Okay, even though some of the calculations may force it to be a non-integer, those are sort of unacceptable and they deserve some sort of warning or something like that. We're not there. Okay. All right. So I think this is my revised feeling of what has to happen for updates. Okay. Now it's kind of like what we did, but it's not quite. All right. So is it possible to have partial pleats at the edges? I believe the answer is they normally don't. I'm not sure if there's a situation where they ever would, because yeah, I mean, you'd think like you could kind of start halfway through a pleat or something and get a half pleat or something. If you run to get an overlap, cut away what you don't need. No, they won't do that because you're having somewhere between like 10 and 30 pleats. So you won't cut anything away it's normally one piece of fabric. And part of the reason is if you're buying this fabric, which is pretty expensive, and you're buying, 8 to 10 yards of it. So it's usually several $100s to get a nice tartan in the length, in a 8 or 10 foot length. A little kid, you might not need that much, but so one of the things they can do is most of this, if you're making it by hand anyway, you can basically take out all the stitches and you've got a full piece of tartan again, so you can reuse it. Like one thing my wife does is alter kilts for people. They gained 4 inches or something, and they need to do something about it. So they do take some flexibility from that. Okay. All right. Let's see. So I'm not sure where we answered this. Is gap and output only? Let's see. I'm getting too many things I could do here. Too many options. Calc 23, 24. It's July now. Box pleat constraints. I'm not sure that's the real job today. Okay. Did I cut that out? Is gap and output only? Yes. So I got an answer there. Yes. Okay. Rounding fractions, total fabric. That's another output. Compute labeled picture from form changes. Okay. I should mention the other one. Let's see if we can. We should be able to run. Okay. So the box pleat. Let's see. So I mentioned you can have a gap, and that's what we showed. I think I may have to do some images, some other images. So if we just have this one, I said, oh, this gap is 0. But if it were 0, these two corners would be touching. All right. Now, if it were less than 0, these two corners would be overlapping by some amount. And that's called an overlap. You ideally don't have it, but sometimes, because like, you want a 2-inch pleat because you've got a 20-inch waist and you want 10 pleats. Okay. And the fact is you're going to get a little 1/8 of an inch overlap in that case. Okay. So these two lines cross each other a little. Now they don't like that in terms of the aesthetics of it, but if it's a 1/16 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch, nobody's going to worry about it. I should get an exact number for my wife. There may not be one, but if you don't leave an inch gap, okay, and you wouldn't have an inch overlap. At some point, and I don't think I have a picture of this yet, there's a slightly different variant of this. This one's very symmetric. This left side equals the right side. But if they overlap, at some point the overlap is big enough, which it could be 3 inches. It could be 5 inches even, depending how deep you want to make it. But what you would do in that case is this left side would go to exactly the middle of the pleat. All right. And then the right side would take all the extra. So let's say we had a 1-inch overlap on a 2-inch pleat. Okay. So these things would, I guess they would split half. How would that work? If it were it's 2-inch pleat, this is 1/2 inch, this is 1/2 inch, and no overlap. If you had a 1-inch overlap, if this was an inch, and this were an inch, that would be exactly the middle. So let's say this was 2 inches and 2 inches. Okay. So 2 inches, this one would come all the way over here, and then this one would come all the way over here. So it's an awkward thing. So what they would do is say, don't be 2 inches, make this side 1 inch, and now you have 2 inches extra instead of 1 inch. Put all 2 inches on this side and make it come underneath this pleat and possibly the neighbor, and even in some cases maybe even 2 neighbors. But all the excess gets shoved to the right side, and they call that a military box pleat. I'm not sure if there's another military pleat that's something else, but military box plate. So I need another picture at some point that shows if the overlap is above a certain point, we don't just overlap, we actually force all this side to make halfway and then put all the excess on the right. And then this kind of comes up to the next left side, to here on the next pleat. Okay. All right. Well, that's a future problem. Okay. Let's see. Where are you putting this? Let's get this somewhere reasonable. Okay. I'm going to try and experiment in layout. I don't know how to make it so. I don't know if I would really love a beep if a message came in. I don't know if I can set that up somewhere. All right, what I'm going to try is, I think, let's push this onto 3. Well, I'll do it like this. Oh, no, I should. Let's do this. Simulator. And then this. I can force it in there with it. And then, well, this one can get out of the way. All right, let's see how this goes. All right, so my goal is not ignore Mardshark 666 or anybody else that speaks up, but leave this here for now. And I think we can take it a little smaller. I think that's still visible. All right. All right, and then the other thing I noticed, I mean, we mentioned it before, but it really would be nicer if this were tab views, and I don't remember the invocations, but let's start with a visual thing that change to tab views. All right, and I think it's just tab view for the things. I'm gonna look. All right, Swift UI tab view example. Tab bar. I don't need the fancy stuff. Tab bar. Tab view. Is it really just these? My tab bar. Okay, go back. Okay, Paul Hudson, man, he's such great help. Okay, tab view, content view. Tab item. Okay, well, let's see what we can do. I guess that's content view. Well, if there's something that deserves some love, it's probably this. It's already getting awkwardly long. Okay. The picker and the grid. Okay. All right, so the sheet is presented. Well, let's put this in and then extract. No, maybe I should extract first. Okay, we'll do that. Extract method. No. Extract method. Okay, this is the calculator view. Return some view, that's good. Okay. And it's just there. Okay, let's try this. Tab view, content. Do I create 2 tab views? Content view. Oh, maybe the top level views. Okay, let's try that. Pleat view. See if I got anything going here. explicit return. Oh, so slow. Okay, so I got to do, I think it was tab item. Do I put it on each one? Label is a view. Oh, what do they call those? There's image. Is it label? Okay, yeah, that's what I want. Label. Calculator. System image. All right, now we got to find one. This one we put in already because we said it was rectangle split 3. It may not be the best, but content view. Parameter v could not be inferred. Yeah, no, without. All right, where are you? Okay, so I don't know if there's a calculator in here. Calc. Number pad. Well, number might be okay. I'd love something that looks like a little keyboard. That almost does. I don't know if we get grid. I mean, grid. Maybe that's okay. Oh. Why is calculator? This is Pleat. Pleats. Calculator view, label, system image, grid. Why is this one okay and that one's confusing? Cannot convert value of type label text image to expected argument type. System image, tab item, label, oh, brackets, braces. Okay. One more try. Well, that could look better. I guess if I get a little more real sized. Yeah, that could definitely look better. There's probably an option somewhere, right? Tab view. Tab view style, that's what I wanted. Automatic page. Well, navigation. Page tab has the little dots. Vertical page style, I don't know. Don't need a carousel. All right, let's go back. I'm not sure if he showed us what he got. I guess I gotta watch the video.
No.
Well, I guess that's what he's got there. So that's sort of a default look. We'll have to see how we feel about it over time. Yeah, we can. Tab view should be the parent. Navigation view inside. Okay. Well, also, I think in our case, I'll let it be for now. Does it work? Yes. Okay. That's a good virtue. Let's see. So I think we'll take it for now. Let's clean up a little bit of stuff here. Z-stack. Okay. Do we need... We don't manage a path. Okay, that's good. Z-stack calculator history view calculator. And there's a lot of pieces here. Okay. But alert is error message. Sheet is presented. Calculator show pleat designer. Let's take that off. Okay, because the reason is if I hit Z, I get it like that, which I don't want anymore. And I think we can remove that characteristic. Show pleat designer. Okay, let's take this variable out. Somebody should be complaining. Down there. Okay. And for now, I'll just leave a print. Okay. Don't think that should be a key. All right. Let's run that. That thing of having to drag it down. I mean, it's sort of it's a reasonably common expectation that you would drag it, but it just doesn't appeal to me from what we're doing. This is better. And I know we're gonna have apron/pleats coming at some point when we may split it up. Pleats, box pleats, and military, or box pleats and knife pleats is the other big kind. All right. Okay. Well, there's not much to say on that. It works. All right, so Yeah, I think you can probably have 4. You might be able to squeak 5 in there, but you don't want too many options in that. Gosh, even this much just feels so much better to me. All right. Where's my to-do? Right. Okay. Change to tab views. I guess that's that. All right. This error situations, there is some truth in it, but let's see. I think we just have to redo some of this work we did. Mark missing fields with red. Lock some fields. That'd be interesting. Okay, this we've dealt with. Well, these things are history related. Call this syntax. All right. I may do some offline stuff, just kind of working on the view a little bit. But what do we have to look at here? It's Pleat view, Pleat designer. Okay, so Pleat designer. I'm wondering if did set is the way to do this. Yeah, the tab's definitely better. All right. The problem with did set. Okay. I'm going to go back here. So if you set the F, you set either of these two, lots of stuff should change, right? We said. Okay, so let's audit this. So if you set this, gosh, this nil thing is annoying. All right, but I think, all right, Pleat, well, Pleat yardage changes, right? Pleat yardage. It's really set times equals set times settsPerPleat. Okay, if you change set or settsPerPleat, you're changing the pleat yardage. We don't have a variable for pleat yardage yet. I introduced that because this relationship is pretty critical. Pleat yardage equals hip divided by pleats. That doesn't sound right. Okay, but let's look at this one. Pleat yardage equals that. Okay, that is a new variable. And it's a double. Or is it a double question mark? And we got some work to do here. These optional fields are going to kill us. All right. This is always... Okay, he doesn't need to calculate it because... Is that true? I think that's true. We'll let everybody else calculate it for him. Okay, so if you set pleat, okay, that's pleatWidth. We also need to set pleat yardage. Okay, so if I don't know, I don't want to break any tests. All right, so I think I'm saying if sets, if I'm looking at the wrong thing. All right. Okay. If the set is nil, pleatWidth is nil, and pleat yardage is nil. Okay. So I think if we go back here, if set is nil, pleat yardage is nil. I mean, well, these two are kind of... Pleat width is nil and gap is nil. Right? I'm going to do the work and then see if we can make sense of it. All right, let's see if that still works. Yardage is nil, width is nil, gap is nil. Total yardage, we haven't dealt with that one. That's a new feature. Let's make that a to-do. Okay, and this is set the set. Pleat designer. Okay. If the set is nil, the yardage is nil, the pleat width is nil, the gap is nil. All right. If you don't know the set, well, the pleat count, that's been set, and this is set. So if you say I want 10 pleats, if you say I want 10 pleats and my hip size is 20, then you kind of know the intended width. All right. I'm not sure. See, there's relationships between these variables, and the problem I see is there's no entity that actually owns the relationship. We're doing it all very piecemeal, and somehow I'd like to say, like, calculating something, how does that impact the other things? And there's things I need to say, these are fixed, and there are things that need to be variable, and there are things that need to be consequences. Okay, if you set the set, you change the pleat yardage, which changes pleat width. Definitely. But you're still after a certain pleat count. Well, if you don't set this, this is nil, this is nil, this is nil, this is nil, meaning I don't know what it is. It's not calculated. This you can still calculate. These two can still be set. Okay. And so if you attempt to set the set, all right, now this is not quite right, is it? So this pleat width, sorry, well, this is pleat yardage. And I'm using an exclamation point, and I haven't proven that settsPerPleat is legit yet. So there's a problem there. There's really a missing test. Maybe there's more than one missing test. Okay. Set to nil makes pleat width and gap count nil. Right. Pleat width and gap. Pleat width, gap, and pleat count are all nil. I don't think that's true. You could still leave these two set and not have a problem. So let's let's take this assertion out. Okay. If set is nil, those yardage width and gap are nil. Can't be calculated without the set. Okay. And then we should have the same thing here. If settsPerPleat updates well, we need this kind of case for sets to pleat. settsPerPleat, set pleatWidth. Okay. setPerPleat makes pleat width. Well, it's really pleat yardage pleats. Pleat count is not in there. Okay. And I guess that will let us introduce pleat yardage. Okay. Now let's make sure it's right. I think I did that a little backwards. What visor set pleat hip to hip? Yeah, those are a must. Do I have a GitHub? Yes. Whoa, did I just crash my... let's see. Okay, that's me. I don't know if I have this public yet. Oh, I guess it's public. Okay. Yeah, so I have one in general, but Kilt CALC should be there. And then, well, the other one is I've got this EG test parameterized testing. We've been using a little NP combo parser. Those are more tools that we've been using along the way. Okay, let's get Xcode back. Thanks. Okay, that's something else. I've been working through 100 days of Swift UI, so that's what this is. We don't need that. There we go. Hopefully that's not too small. We'll see. All right. Pleat designer. Oh, okay. But if... Well, I think we can demonstrate our problem here. Let's see. Test set updates, pleatWidth, etc. Okay. I'm going to make a similar test. Okay. Set with pleats sets per pleat nil updates pleat with pleat with gap pleat count with gap. I don't think pleat count is affected. Okay, so if you set hip to hip, let's set settsPerPleat to nil. Is nil. Okay, and basically pleat width should be nil at this point. Gap should be nil. And pleat count we don't care about, but pleat yardage should be nil. Okay, so if you try and set, but settsPerPleat is nil, then your yardage, your width, and your gap should all be nil. All right. This is going to fail. It's going to have numeric values for some of those. Yeah, there's our explosion. All right. We did this calculation with settsPerPleat exclamation point says use it even if it's nil. Well, if it uses it when it's nil, it blows up. So that's what has happened here. We got to cover this case too. If settsPerPleat is nil, okay, so we know set is not nil at this point. Well, it's really these three things. So let's just pull the condition in here. Or settsPerPleat is nil. Okay. I feel better. This is weird. Usually we're trying to do TDD and you write the test and then force the change. And now we're doing this kind of weird blend. But I guess that one was okay. We wrote a failing test and it failed and now it passes. Okay. So now, okay, settsPerPleat updates. settsPerPleat to nil, make pleatWidth gap. settsPerPleat to nil makes pleatWidth. I guess this is also pleat yardage. And the count is not nil. Okay, so settsPerPleat to nil. I guess we can set it here. 2 set equals 5. Let's do that. Okay, so we'll set it 5. We'll set it to 2. Now we'll clear it. I don't know if we can do that by default, but this will force something anyway. All right, so this should make pleat yardage be nil. All right. And I think this will fail. Well, I guess it's always more interesting when it doesn't. Okay, so we set the hip to hip. We set the set. We set the settsPerPleat. Well, setting settsPerPleat should set pleatWidth. Oh, let's. I think our test set pleatWidth. I think this test is incomplete. The pleatWidth. Oh no, settsPerPleat updates pleatWidth, gap, and pleatCount. That's actually not true. We need our pleat yardage. Oh, 1.5 times 6 is 9. See if I can do that this week. Okay, so that should be 9 inches. Yardage may be a bad name. All right, so 9, pleatWidth 3 is 1/3 of 9. and accuracy gap should be 0, basically. All right, I think this test will now fail, and fixing it will make the other one fail, I hope. Something should fail. All right. It's still nil. Okay, so let's go to Pleat. settsPerPleat. Oh, well, we don't check yardage here either. Okay. Well, Pleat yardage equals this. That, and then we can say Pleat yardage. Okay. So that, I think that'll make this test pass and the next one fail. Since Pleat yardage was never getting set before, it doesn't set properly. It should, okay. Optional 10. Okay, so it left at 10. It didn't reset it. Okay, so now I think the problem is, yeah, Pleat yardage should be nil as well. Okay. And gap? Why does that not cast gap? All right, let's see if that catches the one. How does gap become nil? Set to nil there. settsPerPleat. Okay. There's set. Okay, so this is one of those cases, like I know there's a bug because settsPerPleat is not nil at this point, but set could be, and we haven't done anything about it. But also, we're not setting the gap. And actually, if this happens, the gap should be 0. Is that true here? It is 0. Set is 6. settsPerPleat is 1.5. So 9 divided by 3 should be 0. Okay, I know what's going on. It's a mess. All right. The problem is this has a did set. So we're doing a did set. The settsPerPleat gets set, so it sets pleatWidth, which forces the gap to be set. Well, it's a function of pleatWidth and those other things. Let's go back here. So the gap it's a consequence of pleatWidth, but it's also a consequence of Pleat yardage, which is from these two. So by the time you set pleatWidth, Pleat yardage should be set, and the gap is there. Okay. Now, fabric for Pleat. Okay. So let's see if I got to demonstrate. The problem I see is if set is nil and settsPerPleat is not nil, then it's going to blow up. All right, so let's see. settsPerPleat. There's a lot of... Each individual test makes sense to me, but I feel like, man, we have to have a lot of tests to do this. All right. settsPerPleat. Okay, let's start with this one. settsPerPleat with set nil makes Pleat yardage, pleatWidth, gap be nil. Okay, so I'm setting this 1, but set is nil. And I can let's see. So the 3 in the calculation. Yeah, the 3 is it goes back to that. Oops. Well, let me change this one too. It goes back to that shape we have. Come on. And it's kind of built into the box pleat idea. Okay, so if you take let's take 20. Oops. 20. My keyboard's a little sticky or something. Okay, 20. The set is, let's say, 6. settsPerPleat 1, pleatWidth 2. Then the gap is 0, and the number of pleats is 10. Yeah, so if you got 6 inches, you take the middle 2 inches as the pleat, and then you use an inch plus an inch on the one side and an inch plus an inch on the other, and that gives you 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. So it's a consequence. It's a fixed consequence of this set and settsPerPleat. You're basically saying that's the piece I'm going to divide by 3 to get the default pleat. If I want no gap and no overlap, okay, then the 3 just kind of falls out of the math of what you're doing, the geometry of what you're doing. But if you alter, like if you said, oh, I want a 2.5 inch pleat, well, now there's going to be a gap somewhere because you're just touching with 2 inches, 4 inches worth of fabric, and if somebody takes away half an inch of fabric, you're going to have a gap. Okay. But yeah, that's it's a little weird, I'll grant you. If there's non-zero gap, the number is not 3. Yeah, so if it's non-zero, then there's no you're not using any relationship. So basically what I'm saying is if you change the set or the settsPerPleat, let's just start you back with no gap, and then, which is usually why you change the set or settsPerPleat. Well, the set's fixed, but the settsPerPleat you can manipulate a little bit. 3/4, 1, 1.5, 2. You might find that one of those values makes things work out nicely. But I mean, I could retain the gap and do something else, but sort of the most natural, ideal box pleat is 0 gap, and so. Since your pleat, if you laid this one out, instead of bending it, it would match the pleat, and same for this side. So it's 3 from that geometry. All right. Is this the one I just edited? Yes, this one should fail. I hope. I hope it blows up. Calling my real shot here. Yes, thank you. Okay, and it's the same reason as up here. We got to make sure the other one is not nil. Set equals nil. Okay, so if either of the 2 prerequisite values is not there, then pleatWidth becomes nil. All right, now let's look at gap. Oh, it gets set to nil here when you set pleatWidth. I think this is still legit. Okay, let's run these again. Unexpectedly found nil while unwrapping an optional value. Well, this is... Oh. Sorry. Okay. Now, have we done these two? So, this is actually not needed because we're going to make pleatWidth do all the work. Let's go down there. If pleatWidth is nil, make the gap nil. So that covers that case. All right, so we don't have to. I'll say that, and then let's run the test. Okay. Yardage equals nil, pleatWidth equals nil. All right, now, what do we say for this? Well, okay, yardage should be calculated. If it's set to a real value, yardage gets calculated. All right, it doesn't here. Okay. Let's check our test for pleat yardage. This is set. Well, we checked that it was nil in this case, but we need a case where it's not nil. Set updates pleat width. Well, is this true? Set updates pleat width gap pleat count, but that's only if there's a settsPerPleat. Let's break here. Okay, let's look at designer. And you're gonna make me work for it. Storage value nil. Okay, so it's nil. We'll step over. Now, where's pleat yardage? Oh, where's settsPerPleat? Is 1. Oh, we defaulted. Okay. Set updates pleat gap width. Okay, I want to say yardage too. I need a better word for that. Okay. If the set is 5 and the pleats, well, pleat yardage is 1 times 5. Oh, again. Xcode. We'll report it again. Maybe it'll help them somehow. What seems to be the problem? It crashed, yes. And they're just snooping. I don't really know if it matters. Descendant item. I can't really tell what it's doing. Barry doing something. Okay, send to Apple. I think I said that. Where's Xcode? Oh, I put it back on the right window. That's something. Okay, let's try it again. Yeah, it is that time of year. Okay. Yeah, that is not being set. Okay, so let's get this one right. Okay, and pleat yardage is set times settsPerPleat, and that is what we're using here. And remember, it's a simple double. Nobody's doing anything else with it. And gap? What's it? Okay, gap is that way too. Good. Pleat yardage. Maybe thinking like pleatFabric. That name is used somewhere though. Oh, fabric for pleat. Okay, I can change that. Because it's really inches. All these are working with inches. We don't really work with yards at this level. I mean, when you order it, you would normally say, I want 3 yards of fabric, except that the mills that my wife works with all do meters. So you order 3 meters of fabric to make sure it's at least 3 yards. Okay, so pleatFabric. Let's make sure everything's running. Okay. Improve handling of null in Pleat Designer. Rename Pleat yardage to pleatFabric. Can it be fractional sets? settsPerPleat can be fractional less than 1. So you can say I want to do 3/4 of a pleat. I've got the natural set distance. I could say let's try 3/4 of that, and then I guess 4 times 3/4 is 3. So you'd fit 4 in the space of 3. But the set itself is a length in inches based on the tartan. So yeah, it's the settsPerPleat that would be fractional. And again, this is some of it is you're maybe trying to match other people. If like you're in a band or something, a pipe band, you might all have your kilt designed to look the same way, and you might need a little playing around to make that happen. It may be a function of, you're very large or very small, and you're just a bit the wrong size, and instead of having a fractional pleat count, you take the fraction of the settsPerPleat and make it work that way. But I don't know. You'll definitely. I mean, if you're setting out to build a kilt for somebody, you probably will spend an hour or two designing these options of, well, what if I did a 2-inch pleat? What would happen? And stuff like that. So I think this calculator is going to bring that time down quite a bit for them in the end, I hope. All right. I don't know. I guess I got to look for settsPerPleat. How about pleat? Let's look for pleat yardage. Where's my pleat yardage? Let's make that be pleatFabric. Place all. Okay. Well, so I have to say, I'm feeling like we're see, there's duplication. That's why I get worried. Okay. If, like, maybe should pleatFabric be setting pleatWidth? I don't know. All right, let's go back to this. Okay, so it affects pleat yardage, it affects the pleat, it affects the gap indirectly, because that's always calculated the same. So we don't have to worry about the gap. All right, number of pleats is hip divided by pleat. See, I don't want to set up some recursive situation here. Okay, because these two... You mentioned this the other day. Oh, I missed your comment. It must be a pattern that makes it possible. Yeah. I mean, you're just sort of compromising and saying, well, maybe you're short on fabric and you say I'll just fit 4 pleats in 3 sets instead of 4 pleats in 4 sets. And it changes the stripe effect, but it lets you stretch out your fabric by, however many, well, one quarter of your thing goes away, 1/4 of the number of sets goes away, so your total yardage goes down by 25%. Maybe worth it to you. Okay. But anyway, back to this. The problem is if I set number of pleats, which should change when the pleat changes, but number of pleats has a did set as well. Let's see if I can find it. pleatWidth, pleatCount. Oh, he doesn't now because this was an output last week, and now it's a value. But hey, let's see. So this pleatCount needs to be a function of pleat, but also note that pleat is a function of pleatCount. So if I made both these did set and setting pleatWidth sets pleatCount, well, then pleatCount would be here going like, oh, I better set pleatWidth, and it sets this, which triggers we don't want to go down that path. So I think we need state. All right, and maybe I can. Is it this moment that does it? Number of pleats equals hip divided by pleat. And total yardage we set. I'm going to move this up because it really is set. Oh no, it's a consequence. Okay. Yeah, total yardage is affected by pleat yardage and number of pleats. Okay. Oh, we haven't done total yardage yet. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to say set pleats How are we going to do this? Do I need 2 variables? One says, I'm already being set. Don't set me. Pleat set in progress. Number pleat set in progress. Would that do it? Pleats we set. I'm pleat set in progress. Pleat change in progress. And gap is fine because it's a consequence. Number of pleats comes in and says, set my hip divided by pleat. And oh, I should update, I guess, total yardage and pleat. But we only want to do that if the pleat setting is not in progress. Okay, let's try this situation. Okay, so I guess my test is probably enough to do it. If somebody sets the pleat width, all right, let's get that one straight. Change in pleat. We'll set the gap. Okay, that's fine. We also have to set number of pleats. Okay, let's do that. Pleat count, 10, gap. Okay, this one works as it is. All right, now if change in number of pleats, let's test that one. Pleats equals hip divided by pleat. Okay, hip divided by pleat width. Okay. All right, now test it. Pleat count should change pleat yardage. pleatFabric. I don't know why I type Fabrice all the time. Okay, pleatFabric, pleat, and gap. gap. I guess of course it changes pleat count. Oh, well, it wouldn't hurt me to assert that here either, would it? Whoops. Pleat designer pleat width should be 2. Okay. And this one, set the pleat count, should set the pleatFabric. Fabric should be the pleats hip divided by number of pleats. Is that true? It doesn't sound right. Wait a minute. Pleat yardage is sets. I don't think it should affect that. This is not right. So if you have 10 pleats on a 20-inch hip, each pleat should be 2. So this is what that should be. The number 3 doesn't come in. Right, because that's the pleats. The pleat width is set by that. Okay. Now the gap gets figured. Pleat minus yardage. Okay, pleat yardage doesn't change because that's determined by the set and the settsPerPleat, so that should not change. Okay, the gap. All right, so the pleat should be hip divided by number of pleats. Set pleat count. So this should be pleat count to 2. Well, let's set it to 4. No, let's set it to 10. Keep the math working. All right. Pleat count is a get-only property. Well, that's something we want to change. Okay, so if that happened, 20 divided by 10, then the pleatFabric, well, let's see, the pleat width, let's get that one first. Should be 20 divided by 10 or 2. And the gap, oops. The gap, let's see, the gap is probably next. All right, let's check this first. We set it to 10, it should be 10. All right, the gap, well, a 2-inch pleat on a 5-inch set is 1/2 inch. Right, that's okay. And the pleatFabric, I guess, is 5. Okay, so pleat count is double. Okay, so I think we'll take a break. Hip divided number of pleats generates that. Yeah, does yardage change when pleat counts change? Yes. Total yardage will change because it's pleat yardage times number of pleats. So both sides affect it. settsPerPleat and pleats. Okay. Let's take a break and then we'll come back and fix this thing so it allows did set, and watch it blow up, and then we'll fix that too. All right. See you in about 3 or 4 minutes. All right. Welcome back. Okay. So we got pleatCount here. So we know it's going to have to be published because it's going to change. And we're going to put a did set. Okay, so if you set it to a value, unexpected 9 verb, okay. If hip to hip is nil or pleatWidth is nil, well, how's that work? We're going to set pleat, which sets gaps. And total yardage, wait a minute, what about hip to hip measure? Well, if hip to hip measure is nil, then what does it mean to set pleatWidth or pleatCount? Does that make sense? Can I block you from setting it? I don't think I want to block you. But the fact is you should be nil. But I feel like if I block everybody, then I'm not going to let anybody change. Okay, so if you set it, all right. I guess I got to go to the consequences page again. All right, you set pleatCount. We're not going to worry about total yardage yet. If hip to hip is nil, then we want to return. Okay. We'll worry about pleatWidth in a minute here. Okay. If hip to hip is nil, then return, because you can't set pleatWidth without knowing both these. Basically, they're a triangle. You set 2, the other one's determined. Okay, and this one should be fixed. So it really is, if you set 1, this should be determined. Let's see. If you don't set this one, we can't determine these. Okay. Now, this hip to hip divided by pleatWidth. All right, what sets pleatCount? Well, okay. We've set pleatCount. Hip to hip is not nil. So we should be able to set pleatWidth, hip divided by number of pleats. Okay, and that will set gap. Okay, and set fabric for pleat. Well, this is actually, that's our pleatFabric. That's already set. Okay, and I got another error case, right? Okay, I think we've done the set. We've done the set and settsPerPleat. We haven't dealt with hip. All right, and now we're dealing with the set pleatWidth and pleatCount, and then set hip. Okay. Right. So we want to set pleatFabric. Okay. width is nil, or pleatFabric is nil, if the width is nil or the fabric is nil, the gap is now nil. Otherwise, set the gap. Okay, that part seems okay. This hip-to-hip measure is nil. Well, if pleat count is nil, or that, we'll return, and then pleat count. Hopefully I'm doing this right. Cannot assign to a property. It's a get only property. I think we've dealt with that. Okay, setting pleat count should set pleat width and gap. Is that what we said here? Pleat width and gap. We're not doing total yardage. Okay, I think this part's right, but we don't have the crisscross yet. That, oh man. Okay. All right, let's run these. Okay, set pleat width fails. Hip to hip is there. Okay. That's not the only one. Okay, well this one may be, if hip to hip is not nil, if pleat count is nil or hip to hip is nil, but if they're both not nil, pleat width, sorry, when predecessor value is present. Okay, so we are not setting pleat count when we set pleat width. Pleat count should set, sorry, pleat width should change pleat count. All right, and it does not. I think that's a true statement, right? It only changes gap. Okay, and then pleat count does change pleat width, which changes gap. All right, that test that fails, that's a legitimately failing test. How about this one? Is it nil? Yeah. So it's not setting pleat count in these cases. Right, updating stuff should set pleat count. Okay. And then down here, updating pleat width sets pleat count. Okay, yeah, that's the thing that's not happening. All right, so I guess I'll just let it do its thing and then blow up. Pleat count. Okay, so we got hip divided by pleats equals pleat width. So pleat count equals hip divided by pleat width, right? Measure divided by pleat width. All right, here's hip to hip measure. If the pleat width becomes nil, all right, let's, where to put this? I'll write it on my card for a minute here, but we need to check that pleat width sets count to nil when hip is nil. Okay, but pleat count equals hip divided by pleat width. So if we have 20-inch hip, 2-inch pleats, we get 10 count. All right. Now, I also think because setting pleat count sets pleat width, that we will get an infinite loop and need to put a variable in. You said, I suggest we need only one variable. That could well be right. Okay, there we are. Stuck. Okay, let's stop. Come on, oh man. Okay, there we go. Okay, so to coordinate these, we're going to add a variable that says private var update in progress is false. Okay, and so if you set pleat width well, if it's nil, then I don't think we need to worry about that, but we're going to say update in progress is true, and then update in progress is false. And if not, update in progress. Is that right? We come in, update in progress is false, so we go ahead and set it to true and adjust things. And then similarly, in this one, okay. If not update in progress, then update. Okay. Do we at least get out of the infinite loop? Gap should always be set. Yeah. Oh, hip to hip. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's pull this out first. Gap is always set because it's a value based on things that don't depend on that. All right. Now here's this hip to hip thing. Okay. If you set pleat width and hip to hip is nil, then, sorry, if you, if hip to hip, I guess, hip measure is not equal nil, and we're not in progress. So we're the only one applying. Then we're going to say, okay, I should do this. Now update pleat count. Pleat width is nil, we would have returned, so we know this is okay. All right. Then in here, If hip to hip is nil, return. Okay. If hip to hip is nil, we still want to update gap. Okay, I think that's a little better. Count changes width, yeah. Okay. Wow. If pleatWidth sets count to nil. Wow. pleatWidth sets count to nil when something. When past sale. Okay. So I don't know. I'm frustrated because this just seems really, really hard. Now, interesting. Okay, this is identical though, isn't it? pleatFabric, pleatWidth. And then pleatFabric equals set times settsPerPleat, pleatWidth equals that. Well, those do look very similar. Okay, well, that's some small thing. All right, now pleatWidth. If pleatWidth is nil or fabric is nil, if pleatWidth is nil or fabric is nil, then gap is nil. Okay, if don't know if okay. pleatWidth is nil or fabric is nil, gap is nil. These two determine this. Okay, we set the gap, and then if there is a hip measurement, we update pleatCount. But that doesn't seem quite right. If there's no hip measurement, should we set it to nil? I think we should. All right, let's make a test for that. Ooh, set pleatWidth sets gap and pleatCount. Okay. Set pleatCount. All right, let's do this one. How about sets pleatCount nil if hip is nil? Okay, so that's explicitly nil. Set is 5, set the pleatWidth. pleatWidth should be 2, gap should be 1/2, and pleatCount should be nil. All right, I believe this will fail. Well, that's frustrating. Okay, why are you failing? Oh, let's set it first. Because he may have started out nil. Designer.pleatCount equals 7. We haven't dealt with hip yet. Okay. We set it to set to 5, set to 5, set pleatWidth. Deliver the non-fixed valves. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. All right. pleatCount, hip to hip, set. We set pleatWidth, determines gap, and then pleatCount should be set to nil. I think it will get set. Will get left alone. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back here. Disable the non-fixed fields until the fixed values are set. So I think we want to set, okay, we will never set hip or sets per pleat from pleatWidth or pleatCount. Sets must have valid values. Yeah, that's a good point. So we can check that. That's almost like a will set thing, right? If well, is that right? I haven't dealt with the UI of this yet, but there's something like I would like to see what changes because of something, and I'd like to know what can't be done. Yeah, let's run it a moment. Okay, so if I set pleat width to 2, well 3, then there's no, it doesn't mean anything, right? This should still be nil. This should be nil. Okay. Hip to hip set and settsPerPleat. I guess it would be reasonable to require them. Yeah, that's sort of doable. Right, so okay. All right, let me fix this piece first. So pleatCount, I think I want to leave this alone. Maybe what you're saying will supersede this anyway. Hip to hip measure is nil, then we want it to be nil. Otherwise, hip to hip with pleatWidth. Okay, I think that will make everything pass, and then we'll get that going. Okay. Make constraint, well, deal with setting pleat width or pleat count. Okay, and we haven't dealt with hip yet, but I like what you're saying. So let's make that, and that can be visible in the UI, right? That those 3 fields are required. Once they're filled in, then the other fields are available. Okay. I don't know if I should pull this out first. If set is nil and fabric is nil, maybe I should do what you're saying first, and this will fall out a little bit. But this is identical, so that seems worth something. And where's hip to hip? Hip measure. Oh, right now it's not. Okay, that's not right either. Okay. So let's say var fixed values are set is false. Well, no, it's of type Boolean, and it's going to be computed, and it's well, it's hip to hip. FELDT, hello, welcome. I guess it's welcome back. I don't quite remember the name, but good to see you. So we're working on this Kilt calculator, and what we're doing is in the back of a kilt you have these pleats that are folded fabric, and we're trying to do the calculations to let you figure out how big to make the pleats and how many of them and all that. Okay, so if we're going to do this thing to say we'll only set stuff when it's valid. So it's if hip to hip is not nil, and set is not nil, and settsPerPleat is not nil. Okay, those are the three required values. Let's get this here. Okay. These first three values, if those are available, right. It doesn't need to be published. Okay. If those three values are available, then we should activate these and show the results. Okay. So we should activate these so you can fill them in, and then everything should fall out from that. Okay. The hope is this makes everything much simpler if you can assume those are filled in before you fill in the bottom three. Okay. So let's make this a Pleat view. Okay, pleatWidth and gap. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is say dot disabled when designer dot I want to flip this. Designer fixed values are set. It should be the opposite. So let's rename it and flip it around. Okay, so this is going to be needs required values. If it's nil, or this is nil, or this is nil. Okay, Pleat designer. Okay, I think that's these three. Run that, see if that, it should turn these three off. They'll be there, but they'll be grayed out and not typable, I hope. I don't think that's, well, okay, this I can set 7 inches, 22, and those things all set. Number of pleats, that doesn't seem, oh, we hip to hip doesn't work yet. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is true, but this, let's see if I delete this. Okay. These should have gone gray and question marked or something. Okay. If any of them is not computed, then all of them are not available. All right. Well, I can do some. All right. Let's tentatively do this. Dot foreground color. Designer dot needs required values, then color dot gray, light gray. Gray. I don't know if that works. Otherwise, color dot black. Let's see if that builds. No, it does not. Okay. We'll do gray. Okay, I put on the wrong one, but settsPerPleat and disabled. pleatWidth gap. Format optional designer pleatCount. Oh, it was an output only. Okay. So let's oh man, I'm messing things up. SettsPerPleat. Okay, pleatWidth should fall out. What did I do to gap? Gap should be there. Okay. pleatWidth is a consequence, or sorry, it's a variable. Gap depends on that. And then this one, the field is number of pleats. pleatCount. All right, and then this should go away. Okay, and then all right, I like this suggestion. Color, oh, thank you. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we're running the real thing more. Okay, there we go. Actually, that gray is fine. I could wish for a little bigger or bolder, but that's okay. Yeah. So if I set hip and set, that changes values and we're in play. If I delete it, that turns it back off. Let's make sure each of these acts like that. Yep. Good. Okay. These have a little work to do, but I would like them, if the required values aren't there, I would like these to just all be nil. All right. But we can deal with that. Okay. So, make required values, make variable and consequence values not editable if required values are not present. Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see if it will preview what it'll show. I'm curious. Someday. What it'll show someday. Okay. I think I can let, well, we took out number of pleats. There's pleat drawing. Okay, so well, we're getting something. Okay. And they do keep kind of improving this layout preview thing. Okay, so back here. Right. So this thing, all right, let's look up wheel set. I got to make sure I understand that properly. I don't think it's a Boolean. I think it just does stuff before it goes. Will set is called just before. Okay, so it doesn't change anything. All right, I guess that's no help. Okay, but we've got this now. And I think what we're saying is if set, I think what we're kind of saying is if needs required values, if any of these become nil, then when you set it, then it should just clear out these consequence ones. pleatFabric, you can't see. pleatWidth, gap, and number of pleats. All right, so let's get a test in. I don't know. We'll go back through the test at some point because I think they're overcomplicated. Well, this one checks that. Okay, pleat count fails when hip is missing. Set, and I think we could even set settsPerPleat defaults to 1. So this would be a valid test. Okay. Pleat count fails when pleatWidth is missing. Okay. Pleat count fails when sett is missing. Actually, maybe I want to generalize this one. If, how about when sett is missing, output, what do I want to call these? Are they outputs? Output variables, I'll call them that, are nil. All right, so if hip measure is set and settsPerPleat is set, I'll change it. All right, and you set this to nil, then several things become nil. pleatWidth, gap, and pleatCount should all three be nil. And we know that's not the case here because I've got kind of the opposite one, but we'll do this test too. Actually, I'll do all three. Unusual for me, but okay. When settsPerPleat is missing, then output variables are all nil. Okay. Okay, and finally, when hip is missing, output variables are nil. And let's make sure sett is set. Okay. And I think I need a little space there. Okay, these are going to fail. Okay, sorry, I lost. Do you have any third-party dependence? No, I don't think we have much there. We have EG test, which is pretty small. Yeah, two files, just not that much in them. Okay. This has a little more, but I don't really want to blame that. Yeah, maybe the streaming does use too much. I don't know. But it seems just as fast to run the real one as to wait for the other. So, Okay, when set is missing, output variables are nil. Well, that's coming up true. Okay. Let's see. Pleat designer. Okay, when set is missing. Okay, try and set this. If the set is nil or hip is nil. What are my three outputs, right? They're gap. Fabric is not an output. Okay, gap is nil, but well, we may want to take that out of there. And then pleatCount is nil. All right, and that is really based on this. If you need required variables, then clear out the consequential ones or the set ones. All right, and then okay, and then settsPerFloat. That should also be needs required variables. And we're kind of working on the assumption that these are the same. All right, now the hip one should still fail because we don't check hip. Okay. Is that the only one? setPleatCount. Nil if hip is nil. Okay. That, I would say, is duplicated. Well, wait a minute. Why did that other test fail? When hip is missing, then output variables are nil. This one passed. Why did this one pass and this one fail? pleatCount. Well, we set pleatCount. Oh, hip to hip is nil. This should be nil. Yeah. Okay, that is the same as our test. It's just got a wrong answer. That's the way it used to work. All right. I think, but let's check hip, right? Hip is not enforcing anything. All right. Theoretically, I'm safe to do this then. Did set. And I can say this stuff. All right. Now we haven't dealt with the stuff it should be doing. Okay. Time check there. All right. This should not have any problems still. All right. Good. Make fixed values required. Set consequential values to nil if not there. Sorry, the English is a little ragged there. Okay, now these things. If pleatWidth is nil and fabric is nil, some of this should just go away. We're making If you clear one out, what happens, I guess? Right, I've got these things all set. And if I set this to nil, it should set the other values. Okay, let's see it in action. Make sure we're happy. Yeah, it's not doing enough yet, I think. All right. I think if you can't edit these. 5. And now you set this. Does it update correctly? No. Okay, that's what I expected. That it needed code down here, just like those do, because setting it has consequences. Okay. Right. So setting hip should update those 3. Okay, I think that kind of left off there. So func test set hip updates variable output. All right. So we're going to do these in the other order. Okay, if we do this one last. Okay, so first these are all nil, these are all nil, these are all this is nil. We set this. The pleat count should be 10. Well, I'm going to trust that. Pleat width should be hip divided by pleat count 2. Hip divided by pleat count is 2. If you take a 2-inch pleat and a 5-inch set, you get half an inch extra. And then the pleatFabric is set times pleat count. No, set times settsPerPleat, which is 1, is 5. Okay, I believe this will fail. Yeah, okay, good. They're all nil? Yep, okay. I should not do the calculation if any required values are missing. Yeah, so I'm not sure where that will fit. Let's get hip together first, and then we'll deal with that. Okay. All right, back to my chart. So if you set the hip, it affects the pleat count, the width, and indirectly the gap. So it should set all 3 of these. All right, so pleat count. Okay, so pleat count is, well, I guess it should set the width first. What's right here? You don't have a pleat count, so we can't set it. If you have set and pleats, then you can calculate the width. And then from there you can calculate the pleat count. Okay, so calculate the width, the gap, and the pleat count. Okay, and do we do that down here? The width. Well, fabric is calculated when those 2 are set. So if they're set, then pleat width is all we care about. Okay, and it can't get there if these values aren't there. Is that right? No, it's not. Let's put that too. Okay. Okay, if pleat width is set, that will set gap. Again, maybe I should be setting it, but pleat width sets gap, and then potentially updates this. I think we're going to get away from this somehow. Well, maybe we should say upgrade in progress is true, which means only update your direct consequences. Okay, let's try that. Okay, update in progress true. Set your fabric, set your pleat width, set your gap, set your pleat count is hips divided by width. Okay, and hip measured by pleat count. Okay, so required values checks for all these. Okay. Now, do these... Well, I think those are the same. I mean, gap equals 0 is a consequence. I'm trying to increase duplication. Yeah, if clear the values when hip is nil, so it gets set, there are no other values. Yeah, so I believe if you negate hip to hip, we should just delete those other values, and it'll force it back. So the prefix value to a collection set pleat with that gap. Yeah, I think I think they all should be the same, and yet they're not. Let's see what's up. Okay. Hip to hip, optional 1 2/3. Oh, right, because it's going to force it to exactness. So pleat width 2, gap 0, pleatFabric is set times count is that. And pleat count, I don't want that here. All right, let's take that one out. 20 divided by 2 is 10. I guess this one kind of follows first. Okay. Oh. pleatFabric. Oh, well, it's set. It's 6. Okay. And let's modify settsPerPleat. It's 2, and this becomes 12. Pleat 12 divided by 3 is 4. Gap is 0. 20 divided by 2, I guess divided by 4 is 5. 5 4-inch pleats. Okay, that should still be right. Yeah, I think that's where we're heading. All right, so I think let's pull this out, and this is oops. Am I forgetting my own keystrokes? Oh, there it is. Okay. this is update required, or set non-required variables. I don't know if it's set is the right word. Is establish. And I lost my. Well, that's in the wrong place. File private, that's fine. Published is not there. Interesting it would do that. Believe that might be a bug. Okay. Now, I hope we have everything set so these can all do that. And they don't set pleat count. Oh, they will. There may be somebody who intentionally doesn't set it, but we'll get to them. Okay. pleatFabric expected get. Public var settsPerPleat of double equals this did set, right. Okay. And oh man. Okay. Let's see. Hip to hip set pleatWidth settsPerPleat should be set 12. Let's double check. 20 divided by 2 should be okay. pleatWidth is messing something up. All right. So hip to hip is 20. The pleatWidth is 2. Then it should be pleatCount 10. That sounds right. Hip to pleatWidth of 2 and a 5-inch set leaves half an inch. We've worked that through enough. Okay. And what are you getting? 12? 12. pleatWidth says gap and pleatCount. Okay, let's go to pleatWidth. Now, what? All right, now. We set hips, we set set, we set pleatWidth. Okay, and until we set set, or when we set set, what's the deal? It doesn't know how to set pleatCount. pleatCount is weird at this point, isn't it? I'm sorry, at this point. He should set pleatCount to hip divided by pleatWidth. pleatWidth is 2. All right. I guess we'll stop here. Okay, but that's, let's see what pleatWidth is. I think it's probably still nil. No, it's 1.667. Where's that coming from? Establish. Okay, we're not through there yet. Let's break here too. I guess I should continue. Okay. Now, 2. Okay, so we have set pleatWidth to 2, gap to 1/2. Okay. Update in progress. Closing. Okay. Update in progress is 1. Okay, true. If. Wait a minute. How is that true? Did I not set it back? Yeah, I did not set it back. Oh, golly. All right. I guess that's why we have these tests, right? Correct for stupid mistakes. And clever ones. Good old copy and paste errors. All right. Let's see what we actually changed here. Okay, so we pulled out established non-required variables. All right. Extract method, establish non-required variables. So required fields are consistent how they update others. All right, anything else? 2, 3. It's a function. You gonna get past there? Xcode, man. Okay. Right, those are good. And then the tests, we added a test for hip. Okay. Okay. Oh. I think I'm set pleatWidth and count. Okay, so there's still something funny to me in this. All right, those are okay. Now, pleatWidth, set pleatWidth to double. Okay, if you set it to nil, then we update gap. But I think, in a way, that's not necessary. Because when you set, the only time you set it to nil is when your required fields are there and they explicitly set the gap. So, no harm, but well, they don't explicitly set the gap, should they? Oh, because jeez. Okay, fabric with pleat count. Yeah, those are our variables, right? Fabric with pleat count and gap. 4 variables. Okay, let's make sure those are still good. It's redundant in that sense. Now, whether it's redundant on its own is a question to me. So if pleatWidth is nil, I mean, are you responsible for gap? And I wonder if gap should just do this calculation and it should do this kind of stuff. Let's make that. Does that make sense? Gap. Okay, let's see. Required variables clear gap when any is nil. Take that small win. All right. All right. Well, that gives us somewhere to start tomorrow. I think we've made good progress on this. I believe this chunk is right. I believe all three of these use the same thing. This, again, maybe that can be calculated. Let's leave a question there. So this is calculate gap and pleatFabric on the fly. So that's a question for us tomorrow. I think these are all there. Okay. Now, where I'm not as happy is down in these. Like, this feels funny. Like, if hip to hip is nil, I shouldn't be doing anything probably. So we can look at that. And then pleat count. So those two fields, they set pleatWidth or pleat count. One sets the other. All right. And we'll say look at other look at pleatWidth and pleat count for cases where nil involved. All right, I think there's a little complexity left there, but we've done the bulk of this. We haven't done total yardage, but we got through the rest. I think this stuff is approximately right. That's that core line and this core line, and I believe these are doing their thing. So we'll double check them, but I think we're in pretty good shape, much better than Freddie. Check the required variable. Yes. Yeah, I think gap and the other one can do their own values. And then do I need to check required? Maybe. All right. I'll see you tomorrow, even though it's the 4th of July here, but I'm not busy tomorrow afternoon except for this. So that's 2 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern time or 6 to 8:30 p.m. UTC. Thanks. I had several people speak up today and appreciate that. And Mudshark666, especially, all your advice. We'll pick up again tomorrow. Thanks for joining. Take care.